scientific terms, if there is a God, he has left himself plenty of material to work with. There's no question there. To pick just one example, the indeterminate nature of quantum events would allow a clever and subtle God to influence events in ways that are profound, but scientifically undetectable to us on the quantum level here. Now, this is fascinating. Those events could include the appearance of mutations, the activation of individual neurons in the brain, and even the survival of individual cells and organisms affected by the chance processes of radioactive decay. Chaos theory emphasizes the fact that enormous changes in physical systems can be brought about by unimaginably small changes in initial conditions. And this, too, could serve as an undetectable amplifier of divine action. Isn't that fun? I think that's so fascinating. Another opportunity for divine action can be found in time itself. John Polkinghorne, an Anglican priest, has pointed out that if Western theologians agree on anything, it is on the eternal nature of God. Okay, let's go with that then. This means that God, who always has been and always will be, transcends time and therefore is the master of it. Okay, we, on the other hand, traverse time in a linear fashion. An eternal being who is present everywhere and at all times could easily act to alter what both physicists and Hollywood call the space-time continuum in ways that profoundly affect events. Locked into a single point in time and moving in a single unchanging path from the present to the future, we wouldn't have a clue. And God, the creator of space, time, chance, and indeterminacy, could exercise exactly the degree of control that he chooses to. Are you beginning to get the nuance here? There is plenty of room for God, even with evolution being true and actually happening, which it is and which it does every day. There is plenty of room for God to be involved. We just have to creatively think about it. We get so narrow in our own personal reality that we think this is the total reality. Our limitations are God limitations. Our capabilities are God's capabilities. I mean, it's sheer hubris to limit God to our capabilities. You know what I mean? Miller is so good at pointing this out. God could, in principle, act without being scientifically detectable, even within us. One cell at a time, if he chooses to. That doesn't disturb our freedom either. He would still face the same problems of agency and free will that confront any divine action. No religious person believes that God ever acts so decisively as to force us to do good or compel us to be obedient. That is not how God works. The common experience of religious people is that God provides assistance, inspiration, and strength. But to accept these gifts, it still requires an act of human will. The acceptance is our freedom, or the rejection, whichever. See, this is a free choice to do what is right despite the burden and even the suffering that can result in being alive. Evolution provides suffering and death, and there's evil in the world. How could God be so stupid? How could God be so evil? He must be responsible for it. No. He's all opened up to being free. He's not responsible for it. The actual balance between chance and necessity, contingency and potentiality, which we perceive, seems to me to be consistent with the will of a patient and understanding Creator. Content. Now, here's the Creator's idea. The Creator is content to achieve His purpose through the unfolding of process, and accepting thereby a measure of the vulnerability and the precariousness which always characterizes the gift of freedom by love. By any reasonable analysis, evolution does nothing to distance or to weaken the power of God. Nothing. We already know that we live in a world of natural causes, explainable by the workings of natural law. All that evolution does is to extend the workings of those natural laws to the novelty of life and to its change over time. A God who presides over an evolutionary process is not an impotent, passive observer. Rather, God is one whose genius fashioned a fruitful world in which the process of continuing creation is woven into the fabric of matter itself. He retains the freedom to act. He retains the freedom to reveal himself to his creatures, to inspire, to teach. He is the master of chance and time, whose actions, both powerful and subtle, respect the independence of his creation. Not just us, but the entire creation. He respects the autonomy of it. That is his plan. He gives human beings the genuine freedom to either accept or reject his love. I'm on page 244 now. I really like this also. Even the immensities of geological time dwindle against the age of the universe. Truly. How are the heavy elements of the universe produced? By 10 or 15 billion years of cooking in the interior of stars, which must then collapse and explode to throw all those goodies out into the immensities of space so that we can have our sun, the planets, the stars, and so on and so forth. Now we really look like an afterthought, though, don't we? When you stop and think about the cosmological grandness. You know, that was Carl Sagan's idea, pale blue dot. You get far enough away and we're just so insignificant. What if some people know that creating us was God's intention from the beginning? Well, these very cosmological facts about the immense age of the universe are enough to rule out evolution itself. But why should that be? You see, people think that because we really are insignificant on a simple pale blue dot, that we weren't intended. But why does that have to be? Evolution is a natural process, and natural processes are undirected. That is how God wills it to be. It is undirected from him or anything or anyone else. Even if God can intervene in nature, why should he? When nature, after all, can do a perfectly fine job of achieving his aims anyway, all by itself. Nature is free to grow and flourish, and it does. And that's God's will. And it does it all by itself. That's the point. That doesn't eliminate God. That's his point. To let it be free. Let's see what happens. It's still his plan. It was God, after all, who chose the universal constants that made life possible. The notion that God had to act quickly and directly to produce us contradicts not only the scientific evidence about how our species arose, but even a strict theological reading of history. For instance, why did God wait so many billions of years before we finally showed up?